G'day guys, ZiggyD here. In addition to 6 new acts, the Fall of Oriath 3.0 expansion is also including a new character progression system, the Pantheon. The major plotline for this expansion features the return of the old gods to Rayclast, and with the Pantheon system you'll be able to capture and use some of their powers for yourself. I had a chance to sit down with Grinding Gear Games developer Rory Rackham to glean some insights about this new system.
Could you give us a bit of a rundown on what the Pantheon system is and how it works?
Sure. So as you progress through Acts 6 and beyond, you will slay gods, some of them as part of the story and some of them you'll come across. And
you say that so casually though, slay gods. Just casually slaying gods.
Yeah, it will take a little bit more effort than it sounds like it will. There are going to be 16 of these gods that you will be able to steal their power. And this power, you can't use all of their powers at once, but you will be able to pick gods to use their powers, which will help you fight other gods, and later on the rest of the content in the game. Like they will work in the Atlas of Worlds, as well as any other content you're doing at that point.
How many of these powers can you have active at any one time then?
So you can have one of the major gods, of which there are 4.
Okay.
And those are the ones that you get for completing act bosses, the bosses at the end of each act. Many of them will be gods.
So Act 6 through 9 essentially then?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll be revealing what all of those gods are as we reveal all the details for those acts. So after completing Act 9, you'll have the 4 gods. And then all throughout Act 6 through 9, you will come across minor gods as well. There'll usually be quests leading you towards them, and those will give you powers that are less effective than the major gods, but still really useful and practical, and often quite situational. So the goal is so that you have multiple of these powers. You want to collect them all and then use them in situations where you think are appropriate. They're all situational defensive bonuses that will help you out against some fights.
Okay, so it's something that is focused on being situational, so this isn't something that's been planned with the idea of building your characters around these buffs then?
That's right. Some are going to be more advantageous for some builds than others, but most of them will have a purpose for most characters. You'll have your favorites, the ones you might want to run your average map with, but if you know there's going to be something dangerous and fire-themed, or there's going to be a lot of burning ground, or there's going to be poison ahead, you might switch the god powers that you have active, the Pantheon powers, to better suit the situation.
Okay, so what sort of buffs can we expect to see out of this, and what sort of defensive buffs?
So, for example, the major gods that were revealed so far, the first is the Brine King. He's an aquatic-themed god, and he protects you from freeze, from cold damage, from chills, and from stuns. So he's about keeping you mobile and keeping you in the fight. So his primary power is to make it so that if you're stunned, you're immune to stun for 4 seconds. And if you're frozen, you're immune to freeze for 4 seconds. So you can still be affected by these, but you can't be locked out of doing anything by those abilities. And his further upgrades will protect you from that. One gives you reduced cold damage taken, one reduces the effect of chill on you, and one reduces stun on you.
So this could be something that you use quite often as CI, or something you swap into to fight a specific boss then?
Right. If your character is already vulnerable to stuns, then you will probably use this a lot more. But if your character is, say, a Juggernaut who really doesn't care that much about stuns and freeze and chill effects, then he might not use the Brine King at all, except perhaps if he wants the cold damage taken reduction in some situations. So he won't be using the Brine King's power as often. On the flip side, the other major god we've revealed is Arakali, and that god protects you from damage over time effects. It has specific bonuses against chaos damage over time and bleed effects, as well as burning ground, but gives you a general stat while you're taking damage over time, and another stat that helps you recover after you've stopped taking damage over time. So these are bonuses that could be useful for a character who puts damage over time on themselves a lot, but they'll use it a bit more, but obviously not something they'll need up all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned that these all have some form of upgrade system to them, and the major gods have more upgrades, and the minor gods might have like 1 or 2 upgrades or something?
That's true, yes. So the major gods have 3 upgrades, and these are various map bosses that are themed after the gods or have similar themes. So the Brine King has a lot of cold-themed and slow and stun-themed bosses that you have to slay. And to upgrade them, you'll need a special item that will let you steal their power, steal the map boss's power, and add it to the Brine King's. And this is adding to the Brine King's ability. So now, in addition to protecting you from stun and freeze, he will now also protect you from cold damage. And then one more god, and he'll also protect you from stun durations.
So you mentioned like having a specific item, and you mentioned to me before that this is going to be a consumable item.
Yes.
Why is that?
This will mean that you have to make tough choices over, when you're first entering the Atlas, over which gods you want to enhance their powers. You might say, okay, well, I'm pushing to take on the Hydra, the Guardian of the Hydra, as quickly as possible, so I'm going to focus on fully upgrading the Brine King to protect me from the cold. I'm going to focus on fully upgrading one of the minor gods that I'm going to find very useful during the fight. And then, as your character progresses, you'll continue to unlock more and more of the Pantheon powers.
And how we get these items that are going to be these consumable items to capture these powers in the first place?
There'll be random drops.
So just like maps. A currency drop or something like that, essentially?
Yeah. So once you've fully completed all of the Pantheon's unlocks, you might want to trade them, but that will probably take a considerable amount of time for the average player.
Right, okay. So you use one of these to get each upgrade. Do you need to use them to get the power in the first place, or is that just defeating the god in the first place?
You'll need to use the item to capture the... Oh, so you want for taking the gods' powers in the first place. You just need to slay the gods, and something else will help you capture their powers, which we'll see exactly what that is in the story, yes. But when it gets to the Atlas, you'll need to do it yourself, and so you'll need the items for this.
Yeah. That's good then, because it means no backtracking. You don't have to go back to capture the gods' powers. You'll get it on the first time through, presumably then.
And so the major gods are fairly general in their powers. So although one's protecting you from stuns and slows and one's protecting you from damage over time, the remaining two, we haven't announced the gods in question yet, but one will protect you from very large hits and potentially protect you from giant lethal strikes against you.
Anti-one god, eh?
Yeah, so if you know you're up against a boss that is likely to lay you low in a few lucky hits, then there's a god for you. And the other god is about protecting you from small, quick hits and being surrounded. So if you're in a map where you're not so worried about the boss, but all the minions in it, you'll want to switch to that god before going in.
Yeah, okay, nice. So the Pantheon system is primarily defensive in nature. There's no like offensive benefits here, really. Why is that?
We really wanted this to act as a flexible tool, a flexible solution that characters have to problems, rather than something they want to build their character entirely around. The design was very similar to Ascendancy classes at first, but we wanted to push it in the opposite direction, where Ascendancy classes direct your character towards a certain build or enable some new mechanic that you can play with. These are more protecting you from enemies. This is more about reacting to the environment and giving you multiple tools to do that. None of them completely mitigate a boss's mechanics, but they're all about giving you the edge against the thing that you think is going to be the challenge for your character.
So it's about making it be like more of a flexible tool. So why is like a defensive mechanic a more flexible tool, while an offensive one is not so much?
Simply because you're reacting to what you're coming up against. Not every boss uses every mechanic in the game, so you want to think ahead and know what it is. And although your character has an impact on these choices, as I mentioned with, say, the Juggernaut and the Brine King, it's still something that in any character to be smart, will want to be switching to what they feel is necessary.
It sounds like because we don't really tend to build around like niche defenses, like we don't really, unless you're CI, you don't really build around mitigating freezes if you get that as kind of a bonus, but you do build around your offensive mechanics, like I'm going to deal chaos damage. So I guess if there was a god that was going to give you chaos damage, you would have that on all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So the minor gods have much more situational bonuses than the major gods. We've got things like Tukahama, which gives you physical damage reduction and regen while you're standing still. So it's only good for fights where you can actually... you think you are going to be standing still for quite some time.
If you can face tank the boss or something.
While Aberrath gives you reduction to fire damage taken while moving. So so only for situations where you're taking fire damage and you're already going to be moving to get out of the way anyway. And Rhea Slatha has life flask recovery as her ability. His ability? I'm not quite sure. Its ability, and that was, although not useful for characters that don't even have life flasks, it's good for sustained fights for characters that can't really keep up with life recovery on a boss and need their flasks to keep popping up. Perhaps you might want it for the Labyrinth going in, just so you have that extra edge against Azaro if the fight drags out.
Can you point to each of those gods on your beautiful artwork here, Rory?
One Tokahama's about there. That's him there.
That circle?
Slathers are about there.
I'm just messing with you. So, are you going to be balancing the game moving forwards then with this system in mind, so that it's necessary or expected that players will unlock all of these powers, or most of them?
We don't really expect you to unlock all of the powers, but we will expect you to be taking advantage of their core abilities.
So the primary ability,
the primary
not necessarily
abilities.
The upgrades.
Yeah,
right.
But a lot of our bosses going forward will be designed so that we know, okay, so here are the 3 minor gods that you might choose to use against this encounter, and here's the advantage of using the Brine King against this guy, and here's the advantage of using any of the other gods. So we'll be thinking about what you want to do and not make it sure, or try to make sure that most boss fights don't have an obvious answer, and designing with that in mind. There is content like the Guardians that we probably won't be making more challenging. There are certain gods that we had Guardians in mind of, like, oh, I would want this to fight this Guardian and that to fight that Guardian, for example. And same for the Shaper. There are certain Shaper mechanics that are well mitigated by Arakaali, and there are certain Shaper mechanics that are mitigated by some of the other major gods.
So you don't really plan on buffing those guys this is just something, if you're smart enough to pick those right ones, you're going to get a benefit.
Yeah, not that particular content, but other content, we'll be designing it with it in mind,
Okay.
Some more accessible content.
This sounds like one of those kind of mechanics that I'm a really big fan of, something that rewards player knowledge. Was that kind of at the forefront of your design of this?
It was. It works well both ways, because it's both player knowledge going in. You can prepare the gods before you enter the map. And also, if a player doesn't have much knowledge, they'll encounter the boss, they can portal out back to their hideout, switch the god powers they have active, and respond to the threat that they have. If their character has a particular weakness, maybe even you don't have the resistances you need, if you've just entered maps or something like that, and you find that, oh, I'm taking a lot of chaos damage, then I will switch to the gods that protect me from this, because I almost died in that last map run.
So you can have that proactive or that reactive stance with it, and both work. Because, I don't know if we mentioned this earlier, but you can swap this freely as long as you're in town, right?
Yes, you can change it however you want within your town or your hideout, just not out in the world or in a map. So, in a way, it costs a map portal to switch it in a map. Yeah.
Sounds reasonable. That sounds reasonable.
And one of the other advantages of this design, part of the reason we're attracted to it, is because it also opens up builds a little more, where you don't need your build to be able to mitigate every kind of defense. If your build is particularly vulnerable to Reflect, but you don't want to spec into the Elementalist node, or you don't want to use a unique item that protects you from Reflect, there will be a minor god that can help you out and protect you from Reflect a bit.
Okay. So that's something you can just kind of run all the time when you're expecting to encounter Reflect, and then swap it out for a boss that doesn't have Reflect.
Exactly.
Okay. And is this something you guys think you'll be expanding over time, like adding more gods or changing the god powers in any way?
Definitely during the beta, we're going to be doing a lot of iteration, responding to feedback on what gods people like, and what even suggestions for mechanics that they think make sense for the gods, and that sort of stuff. Only the story will decide whether we end up with more gods turning up. If we start having gods appear later in the game, we'll see. But for now, we're just going to be focusing on the 4 major and the 12 minor.
And there's a bit of space for you to work in extra gods to your artwork here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time, Rory. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Great. Cheers.
So guys, hopefully you enjoyed this early look at the Pantheon system in Path of Exile's expansion 3.0. If you guys want to check out more content for 3.0 and the upcoming 2.6 League, then make sure to hit that subscribe button. That's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.